I'm going to turn it over to Shelly. Shelly is out of our Murray office. She's one of our therapists there, and she's awesome. So she's going to be presenting today, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm super excited about the webinar today. I volunteered to give this webinar on singles, and when I first started researching it, I really thought it was going to be, I was just telling Heather, I said, I really thought this was going to be more about singles and their awesome lives. And I said, but when I kind of got into it, what I started realizing is there's kind of an evolution that has gotten us to this point where people can live as singles and they can be happy, and it's not frowned upon. There's social norms that are being built around that way of life now, where it hasn't been that way in our history. So I thought it'd be really interesting to discuss, quickly, kind of the history and the evolution of how we got here. And then also the research that I did was pointing to the fact that singles really do have some incredible qualities that make them very resilient, very healthy in many ways, that people that have gotten into relationships are not so much anymore, particularly people who marry or get into relationships or marry before they really understand or know who they are. So it's kind of been an interesting journey for me. And I did want to put a lot of emphasis into the research behind it. It may not look that way to you, but I did want to make sure that what I was looking at, there was more than one report that backed it up. So you might hear me use terms or say things more than once or twice, and it's just because those things showed up in a lot of the research that many times, which means I can kind of take it at its word. So with that, the other thing that I'm hoping today is that it's not just singles that are joining this webinar, because it really is for everybody. It's for singles, married, people who are partnered in any way or in any other type of relationship. So I hope you guys get a lot out of it and you learn a lot. And with that, we'll move on. So we're going to start with the history of prehistoric life. And so, of course, I thought of The Croods. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this movie, but it's so good. So if you have a chance, go watch it. But that said, prehistoric life looked very different than it does today. For one thing, it was built on an egalitarian society, which means that the men and the women, kind of everybody was kind of equal. Everybody had equal opportunity to help the whole group survive. And that's what it took. It took a group to survive. You survive through your families, your tribes, villages, communities, but it really did take more than just one individual to survive back in the hunter and gatherer days. Then as we moved on and farming became the norm, marriage became more of an economic and political contract. We were still in need of a lot of the community, and actually there was a lot of extended family that lived either with you or near you that was needed in order to survive, and it was very common to live that way. But marriage was looked at a little bit differently, where that you looked at the skills of your potential mate, not necessarily how attractive they were and their personality, like we look at today, but you looked at their resourcefulness, their ability to be thrifty, and their industriousness as the qualities that you were seeking for in a mate. Additionally, you typically had a big family because you had a farm and it had to be taken care of. And so you needed a lot of people to keep that going. So families were really big. And again, communities pitched in, you helped each other out. And so you needed it took a village to have, to survive at this time. So I thought that was really interesting. Additionally, with Americans, marriage and family was looked at as a duty, an obligation, and as a sacrifice. It protected women also because in this era, women did not have a lot of rights like we have now today. For one thing, a lot of women couldn't own property, and finances were usually handled through men or through their families. And so women still needed that protection of marriage in order to have some kind of a life and stability in their life. Marriage at this time was very much looked at by Americans as a means of survival and a production of goods, more so than a high quality emotional relationship, which is very much what we are usually seeking for today in our marriages and other relationships for that matter. Around about the 1960s, this is when we really start seeing some changes that had to happen before we could get to where we're at today. So let's just kind of look at the 1960s, where the average marrying age was about 23 for males and 20 for females. So remember this, because we'll talk about marrying age today, a little later on. Half of the population was married, so marriage was still very much in the vogue. The majority of women, of course, stayed home, took care of the children. The husband was in the workplace. Majority of women really just had sex with their husbands, and contraception was just becoming popular as a method to plan the families. At this time, women made about 60% of what male counterparts did if they were able to work in the workplace. But the big changes we see in the 1960s really had to do with the way that our society handled divorce, surprisingly. Because up until this time, you had to have a really good reason and a lot of evidence on why you would divorce your spouse. Particularly for women who wanted to divorce their husbands, it was really tough. It was hard for them to get a divorce. And no-fault divorce came into law, as well as some more religious institutions making it easier or okaying the ability to divorce. So this meant that people that at one time they had to stay in their relationships if they were abusive, emotionally abusive, physically abusive, or if you just weren't getting along or you are not in love with your spouse anymore, whatever, you had to stay because there wasn't a way to get a good divorce at that time. With no-fault divorce, it gave people choices now. It gave them a choice on how they wanted to live if they needed to get outside of a really bad relationship. Couples at this time began to let go of some of those old ideals of duty, obligation, and sacrifice. You still saw it, but these viewpoints were just coming into being. The breakdown of the extended family that we talked about with the farming communities and other communities where the family would live close by or maybe even in your house, which still happens in a lot of societies today, just not in America as much. This began to break down. And then individual fulfillment and personal growth started to become a new ideal that was born. So you can see how some of these on the bottom really play into how people can be single today and why they might want to be single today. So let's fast forward to today, because life looks a lot different than it did in the 1960s. And living as a single is much easier than it ever has been, really. We are seeing a change in the pay gap. It's shrinking. It's still not there where we want it to be, but we're at about 82 cents per dollar that men make. They're finding that women are actually doing better in school, and they are getting some of the higher degrees more so than men. They're getting the masters and the PhDs, where men, if they're going to college, are usually stopping at a bachelor's. The women's equality and the women's rights are also helping us so that we can make choices in how we want to live today. Urbanization is huge because we have come off the farm where we were spread out and we needed a lot of people to kind of help us survive. Now we're living in close quarters to each other and a little bit more confined. So urbanization has changed the way that we live. Women are having a greater say-so in their reproductive health, and social norms are more supportive of singles now more than ever. Again, women can now own property and get a credit card. I mean, so back in the 70s, 1970s, a lot of women couldn't get credit cards without a husband's signature or co-signing, and property still in the 1970s was hard for women to own. So we've come a long way, and seen a lot of changes that have helped us progress to the point where we are today. And this brings us to our topic of conversation today, and that is the unexpected joy of being single and learning how to become a happy and complete individual. This was really important to me as I was reading through the research, because irregardless if you're in a marriage or some other committed relationship, we all need to learn how to become good individuals and healthy physically and mentally with ourselves in order to bring that into the relationship. The one thing that I kept thinking of when I was doing this is, you know, in my era, as I was growing up, we were always told marrieds are happier, so that's why you want to get married, because you'll be happier married. And we're going to find out that some of these things that we grew up thinking or knowing, or maybe they were true at one point, are no longer true. And so that was really fascinating to me, to see how things have kind of done a little bit of a switch, and we've changed places. So one thing that was really interesting to me today is that singles are actually outnumbering marrieds in today's society. And I had to sit there and wonder, okay, why? And what does this mean for me? What does it mean for everyone? So that was kind of the first question I asked, but let's take a look at ourselves to begin with, and then we'll kind of evolve into answering that question. The most important relationship, because I keep using that word, the most important relationship you have is with yourself. You are already a whole person, and no one can ever complete you except for you. There was a psychologist that said, people who can make their own choices and choose when and how they connect with other people develop their own inner strength. Remember, no partner completes you. You need to be whole, happy, and okay with yourself on your own before you even consider sharing your life with someone else, which I think is really important words, and something that we should all take into consideration. People with healthy self-esteem or self-love feel confident in their own opinions, interests, and beliefs. It makes them an individual, and it sets them apart as the individual that they are. They're also better to respect and appreciate the abilities and skills of others, and are accountable in word and deed for what they do and say. This is actually terminology that I saw in a couple of research models that I looked at. So I thought this was at least worth mentioning. And being single is about being an individual, but so is being in a relationship, right? Many of us now are recognizing that the healthiest way to be is single. For others, they're choosing to be in a relationship, but there's choices to be made. For those who are choosing to be single now, they have come up with a terminology that they have termed self-partnering or self-partnered. And it actually has a couple of different definitions. I don't know if any of you pay attention to Emma Watson, but she came out, I think it was a few years ago, and said that she's decided that she wants to be single for right now, and that she's happy being single, and she's called it being self-partnered. She's really not the one that came up with the terminology. It was already out there. But let me tell you how people are using it today. It's a term that everybody is using, singles and marrieds and couples alike. For those who want to stay single for life, who feel like that another person in their life is not going to make them happier, or they just don't want to share their life with somebody else or other reasons, they use the word self-partnered as a means to saying, I'm kind of married to myself and I'm happy with myself and I'm going to stay single, at least for now, if not forever. Other people who want to use it, who might be dating or they're married or partnered up, they use it as a means to talk about the way that they feel self-fulfilled within themselves, or they may be using it as a way to talk about themselves working on their individuality and themselves healing past wounds, self-growth, or self-actualization. So kind of a lot of different definitions for the word, but now that you all have an idea what it is, you can start using it for yourselves. Being an individual but married. Let's talk about those people in this world, because there are still many that choose to get married, but they are individual selves. Today, we are swaying towards increasing obligation to self. In the past, it has been obligation to family, to community, to others in our lives. But now, in the present day, we are moving closer to increasingly obligation to self. This means that we're beginning to focus on our individual needs and wants. And additionally, it was really surprising to me how many studies are out there where they have done studies on people who, when they're single, they ask them, how happy do you think you're going to be once you're married? And they take that into account. And then once they're married, some time goes on, they ask them again, and how happy are you now that you're married? And then more time goes on, and they ask them over a myriad of time. It's very interesting to see the differences that I thought people would say compared to what they did say. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. Today, one of the reasons that marriage is so difficult for people is because we are getting overloaded with some of the labels that go along with being married. Husband or wife, provider, mom, dad, and then all the other social labels that we get put on us. If you go into a marriage, if you go into another relationship and you don't know who you are as an individual and you get all these labels suddenly put on you, it can be very overwhelming for people and is showing to increase people's anxiety and depression. In other words, it's really affecting their mental health, and why people are having such an issue with kind of marrying today. And I'd like to say it's because of early marriage, but when you see the age statistics of when people marry today, it can't be all around that. So we really do need to pay close attention to our own individuality before we go into another relationship. If you look at the bottom, today most of us are looking for somebody who can take care of a lot of our needs. And again, we're putting too much emphasis on the help that we need from others, and it becomes too much for them. As a psychologist suggests, selfishness is a healthy state to experience. It lets you maintain a sense of self-identity when interacting with others. Because as we said, many people, often women, can vanish in a relationship as a wife or a husband, a provider, a partner, a mother, a father, to the point of where who they are as an individual is lost. So think about that with yourself. I've met with a lot of people who come in saying, after the kids have left, they don't know who they are anymore, because that's how they identify for so many years. The kids are gone now. They're just left with the spouse in the house. And now, who are they? And what are they about? So an identity crisis can happen in our midlife, and that's very common if we don't work on ourselves throughout our life. And additionally, most individuals they overestimated how happy they thought they would be in a marriage, and they underestimated how happy they thought they would be if they were single. And this is really what keeps a lot of people in unhappy marriages, is because they think that being in the marriage, they'll be happier than if they were single. They underestimate that. So, how old are we now when we're getting married? And this is kind of an interesting fact, because the age has gone way up, as you can imagine. So the average marrying age for women today is 35, and the average age for men is 37. Now, I have to qualify that because in Utah, the numbers are very different. In Utah, the average marrying age for men is 26, and the average marrying age for women is 24. So there's a 10 to 12 year difference there between our state and nationally overall. And so, but the bottom line is that for the most part, on average, we are spending more time singled than coupled. And a great deal of this is due to, you guessed it, the millennials. They're kind of changing the curve, but rightfully so, because they are a little bit more in tune with what's happening in the world today. Millennials, for the most part, are saying they want to choose, 70% say they're choosing to remain single for a longer period of time, which we see given the numbers of how old we are when we're getting married now, if not forever, because they don't want to settle. They don't want the rinse and repeat. They don't want to go through many different relationships in order to find, the perfect one, and they're questioning a lot of the norms and problems relative to marriage that they're singling out. Also, their generation is very self-seeking, self-gratification, and that is what is important to them. Most of them say that they would rather remain single most of their life than marrying somebody that they didn't love. In other words, they don't want to settle. And additionally, most millennials say that they don't find that a romantic partner is tied anyway to their happiness. They're more involved and concerned with their friend circles than they are with the one romantic relationship. So a lot of the things that they're looking at are quite a bit healthier than the way that we used to look at things. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from the millennials with this. We are beginning to see a shift from a dominance of couplehood, which we have seen pretty much from the beginning of time, to now singlehood. As we stated before, a third of the population are now single due to choice or divorce, or they're widowed. Singles are growing at 10 times the rate of the actual population. Norms and values in society are more accepting of singles, and individuals enjoy their friend community, as I had just said. That's where they look for companionship and for some of their self-value. Dating apps are making it easier for others to reach out and meet people. That circle is widening, and a lot of them are using it, and particularly millennials, a lot of them will use the dating app as a means to find new friends. It's not just for dating. And relationship no longer holds the power over the individual and their overall happiness. So I kind of wondered how the D word, or divorce, kind of played into all of this. Right now, 42% of people who get married end up divorced. And that might seem excessively high. It is. I mean, none of us like to see a number that high for divorce. But the numbers are actually going down as opposed to the 1970s and 80s. When no-fault divorce hit, we kind of saw a surge of divorce going up for a number of years. now things are kind of plateauing and kind of going down a little bit. And that may have a lot to do too with the fact that we are getting married later in life, and other factors involved. So what has happened to the happily ever after that we've all been promised with marriage? What happened to that? As we touched on before, research indicates that in the past, many people overestimate the joy of marriage and underestimate the toll of living with a partner they don't feel close to. And additionally, most individuals underestimate how happy they can feel being single. And again, this is one of those things that kept popping up in my research. Most of the research I was looking up brought this up over and over again. I really liked this little quote here, where single isn't a status, but it's a word that describes a person who is strong enough to live and enjoy life without depending on others. I love that, because single isn't just a status of relationship. It is, it can describe you as a human being also. So I really loved that little quote. Is it ever happily ever after? Of course, we all know that that's a fallacy, right? And I think that millennials are really bringing more and more attention to this. So studies from Michigan State University conclude that people tend to overestimate their happiness level by being married, which we've talked about. And here is the really shocking thing. Most people who think that, once I get married, then I'm going to be really happy and I'm going to stay happy. This is the amount of happy that after a marriage that most people get to, about 1/10 of 1 point boost in their happiness. That's not very much. It's a little shocking. The other thing that really isn't that surprising, if you understand how some of these things work, is that for the most part, the majority of people that got married, they had a spike in happiness, not as big as they really thought it was going to be, but then they went back to their baseline after the marriage ceremony and the nuptials were over. They kind of reverted back to their baseline of the emotional uptick following the marriage. That's really surprising to me. The 1/10 of 1 point, that's not very much. In fact, it's hardly anything at all. So it can be a bit surprising. So bottom line is, don't go get married because you think it's going to make you happier, because it probably isn't going to. There are equal amounts reporting ending up less happy after marriage as there were people that felt content after getting married. So what is the secret? What is the secret to all of this? I really liked, I had to kind of go after Tony Robbins. His core message is that the quality of your relationships determine the quality of your life. The quality of your relationships determine the quality of your life, and that includes the relationship with yourself. That's the most important one. And one thing that I often talk with a lot of my clients about is this very thing, is learning to love yourself. And I've had people, actually I saw something on Facebook once where somebody was, saying, quit telling me that I need to love myself first before I can love somebody else or other people can love me. I'm worthy of love. And I want to stress here, everyone is worthy of love. But the important thing to remember is that if you can't accept love from yourself, it's very, very difficult to accept love from other people. And I think that that's why it is so critical we learn to love ourselves first, so we can be more accepting of love from other people. Plus that love just kind of spreads around. So here are 10 ways that Tony shares with us to help build a relationship with ourselves. There were a lot of other like psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists that kind of had the same kind of lists, and all of them are about the same, surprisingly. So I just used Tony's because they were pretty manageable. So first of all is to be kind to yourself, which can be simple. We tend to make it a little harder than it really has to be. It is hard to kind of master this kind of concept, being kind to myself. We're always taught to be kind to other people, but it all has to start with ourselves, right? How we treat ourselves is often indicative of how we treat other people. So consider that. And the reason it can be kind of hard is because we grow up in a society that's always telling us how to look and how we're supposed to live and how we're supposed to feel. And so it can be tricky to kind of overcome some of those, the labels and the things that we hear from society, and learning just to be okay with who we are as an individual and as a person. Give yourself permission to be human, because all of us are. We are all going to make mistakes, and no matter who we are worthy of love. I can't reiterate that enough. Number 2, changing your self-talk. Remember that beliefs have the power to create, but they also have the power to destroy. The way that you talk about yourself will affect your mood, and it will affect your behavior. And your negative inner thoughts become very self-fulfilling prophecy. If you can turn those around into more positive self-talk, pay attention to how some of the positive self-talk, again, will become self-fulfilling prophecy for yourself. And hold your standards high, but give yourself a break if you make mistakes. So 3. Okay, adjust your physical state. I use this a lot with my younger clients. How we hold ourselves says a lot about us, but it also sends signals to the brain. So if we're standing up tall and we have eye contact with people, and we might, some people like to use the V form with their arms to, I think it's called the Superman arms, to make themselves feel a little bit more self-confident and more powerful. It does send signals to our brain, and it has a lot to do with how we feel about ourselves. Again, how you hold yourself says a lot to your brain, which then again evolves into more self-love for yourself. So I loved that one. Meditate, always meditation, because bringing your brain into the now, it loves being there. Our brains function very best in the now. It doesn't understand the future, and it understands the past is gone and can't do anything about it. So working in the now is always a really, really good place to be. And with meditation, we have the breath that is kind of the physical part of it, that can help you change your mindset. But if you use mantras are a really good thing, where you say something over and over, either in your mind or under your breath, with your breath. You could use the mantra, I am worthy of love. Start saying that over and over again, and you will start seeing some changes in the way that your brain starts thinking about yourself. Because again, the brain is most effective when it's working in the now. And when you're using a really positive mantra at that time, it kind of does triple duty on yourself and your brain at the time. Create healthy relationships. Of course, the most important relationship is with yourself. So create that healthy relationship, but then don't allow relationships into your life that are negative or may be hurting you emotionally. Adopting an abundance mindset. So when you practice gratitude and can start adopting an abundance mindset in what you do, it naturally bubbles over into how you feel about yourself. If you look for the good in all situations, you stop reading the negative self-talk into the situation and into yourself. Give yourself a break. We are all human. And besides which, you have to understand most of the things that you think people really care about, they're forgotten within either a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes at most. So if you feel like you've made a grave error or done something really awful, or, this is the one that I really love, a lot of people really think that other people are always thinking about them, and it's always in negative terms. So I always like to come up with the evidence for that. And if I say to them, how often do you think about other people? They'll say, I don't think about other people all that much. Well, stop and think about, if you don't, why do you think other people think about you that much? So you kind of have to look for the evidence with that. And that kind of goes along with adopting an abundance mindset. Look for the evidence for the pros. And you can look for the evidence for the cons, but they're typically not there. So another way of building on your self-love. 7, going off the grid. Taking time to relax and recharge is super healthy for us, and so that we can reconnect with our core self. I was reading that a lot of the more brilliant individuals in our society today, this is where they go to get a lot of their good ideas. They take themselves off the grid and really contemplate life and themselves, and that's where they come up with a lot of their really good ideas. So something else to consider, practice self-care. I'm a huge proponent of this. We need to do nice things for ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves, and we need to treat ourselves with kindness. When you are building a relationship, the best way to build love for another person is to do nice things for them. So the same saying would go for ourselves. If you want to build self-love, do nice things for yourself and build on that. Something to also remember with your relationship though too. Number 9, push yourself. If we only do things that we're good at, we're never going to grow. So it's essential to get out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself. Do something that might be a little scary. Take a class on public speaking, or do something that kind of pushes the envelope that you typically find yourself in. Remember that you're going to find that you're a lot more capable of doing things than you ever imagined, and that just builds on self-esteem and self-love. And then number 10, do something you're good at, but take the credit for it. It's always nice to do things that we're really good at, especially for other people. If they acknowledge it, if they give you credit for it, take it. You not only help yourself, but you help the other individual that has just complimented you. So here are some things that you can think about falling in love with yourself, because you are the most important relationship in your life. And all of them are very doable and easy to manage in your life. Okay, moving on with the joy of being single. So in the past, love, dating, and marriage have always often been venerated as the ultimate goal in life. We can, however, become too focused on any of these things in order not to pay attention to our own needs and ourselves. We avoid paying attention to ourselves by putting some of that attention on other things that are going on, like marriage, love, and dating. Because what have we been told our whole life? If you fall in love, you have to date, then you fall in love, and then you get married, and then you're going to be happy. But we're finding now that that's not the case anymore, that actually singles are very happy. And you're going to see why and how you can incorporate some of that into your own life. But running away from ourselves by trying to find love, we ultimately avoid the work we need to return to selfhood and to things that actually bring us lasting happiness. And here's where we get to some of the qualities of people who are single and why they are so happy. One of the major benefits of being single is having the space in your life to spend quality time with your friends. Now, I think overall, with all of the studies that I have seen and all of the research that I read, the time factor is probably the biggest elements that singles have over people in relationships or married with families. They have a lot more time to spend and focus on themselves, and that's really critical in the happiness factor. So knowing that, how do you incorporate that into your own life? Being single increases social connections as singles reach out more to their social networks. So singles nowadays, particularly millennials, and I don't know if any of you have noticed this, they have a really wide breadth of circle of friends. They rely on a lot of different people in their lives to build their happiness with. And those connections, they can work on them because once again, what? They have more time. Singles give and receive more help from those contacts compared to the married counterparts. So in other words, being single and dependent means you don't have just an immediate person. The marrieds have the one, singles have the ones. They have a wider group of people to bounce ideas off of, not just the one individual. So, because of the added time element that singles have, they enjoy flexibility and freedom that often you don't get when you are in a relationship or if you're married. But here's what they benefit from with that additional time. They don't typically get stuck on a certain trajectory like a lot of people will do, because if they're married and they're responsible for a family, they like to stay on a career path so they can build that up, build their income as their family grows. Singles don't have that worry, and so they can change jobs and change where they live and other things in their life much easier. They have greater satisfaction in careers. This would make sense, right? Because they have more time to focus on their career and give it the attention it needs. Their enjoyment of personal time and ability to expand their interests is greater, which makes sense also. They have more time to focus on their health. Singles tend to spend a great deal more time in the gym than those in a relationship or married. They know that they can trust themselves. I like this aspect because this speaks to their mental health. And I really like this aspect where they learn to rely more on themselves than other people. They experience greater self-growth, which comes along with the territory with all these things that we've talked about. But again, it all comes back to the fact that they have more time to focus on themselves. They understand their roles in life. Remember how we talked about getting into a marriage and to other relationships? We're often bombarded with these roles before we really understand who we are. Singles can take the time to figure out who they are, so when the roles are added, they can set boundaries in their life to either accept the new role or decide it's not for them. So understanding the roles in life is kind of critical to all of our overall health. They also get to enjoy designing their own life because they don't have a family to worry about. Again, they can up and leave, move to a different city, move to a different country, change jobs, find a new career path, and it doesn't affect anyone but themselves. So these are all huge benefits for those who are living single. I don't want to make it seem like it's bad or good. It's just the way it is. And what can we learn from that? Those that are in relationships or maybe married. What do you want to take out of this? Their circle of people they get to meet grows. So, 20 years ago, the people that you met were the people that your family introduced you to, or your friends, or maybe you went to college and you met your spouse there, or you got a job and you met your spouse through your job. Well, millennials in particular are setting boundary lines between their personal life and their professional life now. And more are using dating apps and single apps to kind of build their circle of friends, or they start with a certain number of friends and they build from there based off of their friends' friends. So the circle is growing. It's easier for them, especially with social media and online dating apps that are out there today that we didn't have 20 years ago. Singles nowadays are also growing into those from middle age on up. So among those ages 54 to 64, the divorce rate has quadrupled over the past 30 years, which means a lot of these women and men, it's typically women because you see that statistic below that women are outliving men by 14 years. Those who become widow typically decide to just stay single. They don't remarry again because most women find single life very fulfilling. I wanted to get an idea of what males and females are saying about being single today. So I found some interviews, and I'm just going to read little snippets out of these. Now that I look at that photograph, that looks a little bit seductive. Sorry about that. Didn't mean it for it to look like that. Okay, so first of all, the first three interviews are from women. Diana is 35, and she says, I'm currently single by choice. I broke up with my long-term boyfriend about 6 years ago. We had a great relationship, but I wasn't in love with him, and I didn't want to settle. And I felt selfish for keeping him when I didn't have those feelings for him. 6 years later, I feel like an entirely different person. I've learned to ignore the single shamers and have embraced my independence. I learned how strong I could be when I moved across the country for a new job and had to rely solely on myself. Being single has taught me to love my quirks because my quirks are my strengths. I'm single and I'm happier than I've ever been. And then Lori, who's 45, said, I get lonely sometimes and occasionally miss having someone in my life. But overall, I enjoy doing my own thing, sleeping alone and being by myself. I've been single more than I've been coupled up. Since turning 40 and having a couple of bad experiences with dating, I've decided to stay single for the rest of my life. I would tell my younger self that the opinions of others are not important. The most important relationship in my life is with myself. And then Rachel, who is 56, said, I thought that when I finally got out of my emotionally abusive marriage, that I would be looking for someone who I'd always dreamed of, that treated me with the kindness and respect and love for the quality person that I am. It turns out the person I was looking for was myself. I love my single life and am happier now more than ever. So those are the women. So I looked up men that may have interviewed also and talked about their single lives and what it's like being single. This is a really interesting thing because I couldn't find any really productive interviews. What I did find is men talking about why they had chosen to stay single. And so these might surprise you, maybe not. A lot of them talked about their looks, and they felt like because they were bald or short or you know, there's something about their looks in particular that's why that they had never been able to find somebody, or they lacked confidence, or they just didn't want to put the effort into a long-term relationship, or they felt like they lacked flirting skills, or they were too shy. So these are the reasons. When they were asked to talk about being single, they gave reasons why they were single. They were burned in relationships, or they were too picky. In other words, I couldn't find any interviews that males gave. Now, it's not to say that they're not out there. I just couldn't find any, and I did a lot of looking. So I thought this was kind of an interesting dichotomy between the males and the females. When they were asked why they enjoyed being single, men kind of took it as why I'm still single. And women had a lot to say on the matter. So I thought that was really interesting. Well, let's be real. Being single has its own unique challenges and gifts. It's not all unicorns and rainbows, right? Is anything in life? Being single today has its challenges. It can be lonely. At times, there can be a lack of intimacy. Oftentimes, you have to do things solo. You have the expense of living alone and the reduced benefits, think taxes. And there's extra safety and security precautions, particularly for women. But keep in mind, some of these are happening within marriages too. Being lonely and alone in a marriage is a very sad way to live. So it doesn't just happen being single, but these are some of the downfalls. Being single, it can take a skill set. And a lot of the research that I looked at talked about certain skill sets that singles today have. It takes a skill set to kind of understand what fulfills you and knowing the difference between being alone and being lonely, because they're kind of two different things. Learning how to be patient with yourself, learning to love who you are, which is what we just talked a great deal about. Learning how to travel on your own. That's a skill set in and of itself. More of the benefits of being independent. What can we all learn? Based on research by Bella DiPaolo, the benefits of being single versus married, they have, whoops, kind of hit that. They're not dependent on or accountable to a partner for finances. They focus more on personal growth. They get more sleep. And they have a wider range of friends, which we talked about, stronger relationships with the friends, family, partners, and siblings. Singles tend to be healthier, which is no surprise if they can spend more time at the gym, and they probably spend more money on their food also. And they volunteer more often, which again, doesn't surprise me when you think about the amount of time that it takes to do that. I loved this photograph. I wanted that blanket so badly. Singles are less materialistic than married. That was a little bit surprising to me. They're better at being their own source of comfort and security. They don't look to others to constantly give them the comfort and security that oftentimes comes in a relationship, but they know how to do that themselves. They self-soothe themselves. Singles have a heightened sense of self-determination, and they know the difference between loneliness and being alone, as we had mentioned before, because they are two different things. One is a kind of a mindset, and the other is just, being more mindful about what you're doing. You're doing it alone in order to build on yourself. So to sum it up, single people were found to typically have more meaningful work, autonomy, self-mastery, overall meaning in life, self-development and growth, well-developed independence, personal strength, which all can be summed up with the ability to do this all because they have more time. So something to consider. I liked this terminology of the mindset of individuality because it kind of sums up what brought this all together. Singles versus those that want to be in a relationship or married. Like, what qualities can we be sharing? Because we are all individuals. So we can all gain a great understanding of the importance of learning who we are as an individual and loving ourselves for that. It improves our own life and the life that we might want to share with others. Going into a relationship with our best self is very healthy. Gaining skills to be more resilient, more reliant, self-motivated, and discovering a greater purpose within our own life. Being okay with who we are as individuals. I love this skill set because it helps us to be happy in whatever lifestyle we choose, because you're happy as an individual. You're not looking outside of yourself for happiness. I don't know how many of you have worked with a therapist or have been in therapy, but that is one thing that that's kind of our mantra. Don't look outside of yourself for happiness. It starts here. It starts with yourself. You are responsible for your own happiness. No one else is. That's what I love about this mindset of individuality. One thing that you might want to consider, whether you're single or married, is to come up with a mission statement. And I was actually working with a client today, and we were talking about mission statements and values. And because a mission statement incorporates your values, so you better understand what you want and what you stand for as you move forward in life. If you lead a life that is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Intentional. If you lead an intentional life, this is a very good thing to have on hand. If you can't think of your values, because it can be a little difficult, and there are a lot of words to describe values out there. Google it. You can Google list of values and go through it and see what speaks to you. Then write them down and start incorporating them into the different aspects of your life. So if you really value honesty, you hold yourself to staying as honest as you possibly can with all people. But you also look outside of that and say, the people in my life, I really want them to be honest individuals. That's what I value in my life. So people that you recognize as maybe those who might be tend to lie more often than not, or you just don't feel like you can trust very much. You may not want to include them in your inner circle because your value system says, I really hold this value to be really important to me. I really value honesty. So something to consider doing for yourself and as a couple also, having one for an individual and one as a couple. What changes do you want to make in your life? What is your vision? This is really great to have with your mission statement. Treat it just as if you were doing a business mission statement. They do the exact same thing. And what new attitudes do you want to develop? These might be really fun to do as an exercise for yourself to kind of see where you are on that spectrum, and then what you want to incorporate in your own life to build your life with more intention. And then working on the mindset and skills of individuality, doing things alone. It sounds a little bit hard if you haven't ever done it, but going out to eat or going to a movie or shopping alone, try it once or twice, because I promise it won't hurt you. Don't be cynical. Try to keep a positive mindset. Travel alone. Learn how to travel alone. Even if you're married or you're in a relationship, go out and travel alone and see how much freedom it brings you. You get to make all the choices. You get to decide where you're going. It's actually really exhilarating. Develop self-awareness. One of the things we just talked about will help you in developing that self-awareness. And that is doing the little exercise that we just discussed with your values and coming up with goals in that for your future. Living an intentional life. Foster other relationships. Well, we just saw how singles are really good at doing this. Maybe it's something you want to incorporate in your own life. Go out there, start a conversation with somebody without having a real reason to do so. It can build on a friendship. Learn to feel and live with intention. This is a term I use over and over again because it will make a real difference in your life. When you have intention in everything that you do, it changes the way you see things. And you learn how to go inside yourself intuitively to decide, is this really what I want? Is this who I am? And decide how you feel about it. Learning how to feel, oh gosh, it changes your life rather than ignoring those. Meet new people. Again, fostering other relationships, meeting new people. That's where it all starts. Be honest with yourself. Hold yourself to some value system. People who go out and just try to live life as it comes at them, you'll notice they're very wishy-washy people, and they don't seem to have a lot of self-integrity. So being honest with yourself and holding yourself to some of these standards keeps your integrity. Be weird. There's nothing wrong with being weird, just be safe. But, if you're by yourself in particular, if you want to be weird, that builds on your character. And building character is always a great thing to do, especially for yourself. And make mistakes. I can't say that enough. Make mistakes, make mistakes, make mistakes, because they're there for a reason. They teach us something about ourselves. They teach us about our life. So don't be afraid if you make a mistake. It's just part of the learning process and part of building you into the individual that you are. Single and happy will be found in the practice of presence and embracing your wonderful life as it is. The grass is not always greener on the other side. It's funny because I have friends that are single who look at married friends with envy and say, oh, if I was married, I would be as happy as they are. And then I find out that the married friends that they're envious of are looking at their single friends going, oh, I wish I was single. I wish they have the life. I wish I could be like that. So it just comes down to the adage of, we always want what we don't have. Wherever you're at in your life, pay attention to it and learn how to be happy by being happy with yourself. This is your life, so have some fun at it, okay? I like some of these photographs that I've pulled in here. The one thing that I can tell you, friends, and I'm sure that you will share this sentiment, is that I have friends that are married. I've been married. I have friends that are single, divorced, widowed, all walks of life. I've been married and I'm single now. But the one thing that I have noticed is that I see my friends and myself go through the walks of life of miscarriages, losing parents, losing spouses, changing careers, buying a house, losing a house, leaving their religion. They confront abuse. They lose jobs. They parent children. I've seen many of my friends' marriages end. I've seen my own marriage end. I've seen marriages that are good and marriages that are very difficult, sometimes at the same time. I've seen the kind of joy and peace of partnership that is good because it is joy and peace and partnership. This is your life. Stop waiting to live it until things are under your control. Want, but don't stop wanting for 10,000 other things that are already in your life that are so good. The best relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. And that was what I wanted to put across with this webinar. It's not just about singles having it all and being the ones that are the only happy ones. We can have it all too, but we have a lot to learn from each other, single, married, or otherwise. So with that, I will end, and I need to turn the time back over to Heather.
Awesome, great job. So I am just going to read a couple of these questions. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to me in the chat. Okay, so one of them is, they said, any help on working on yourself when you are single but still have kids that are preteen and teenager?
Oh yeah, isn't that interesting? I didn't see a whole lot of research behind that one, right? I think it comes down to finding the quality time you want for yourself, which can be really tough, whether it takes babysitters or having somebody else watch your kids. Please try to find time for yourself and growing the things that you want in your life. I really identify with some of those points when it comes down to people losing themselves because of all of the other labels that get put on us. We lose ourselves in raising our children because we have to focus so much time and effort there. But what I found, and I get a lot of particularly women that come in who say, my kids have grown and I have no idea who I am. I don't even know what I like. I don't even know what food I like. These are honest questions that have come to me. So the one thing that I would put across to you right now is try and find quality time for yourself as much as you can during the week to take care of yourself and go out there and build some of your interests so that when your kids are gone, you know who you are.
Okay, and this one says, being single and young is completely different from being old and single. It's not about loving yourself or finding happiness in others. It's also acknowledging that marriage is not the end game. It's more
Mhm.
fundamental. Being single and never married at my age sometimes feels like nobody wants you. It has
Mhm.
a rippling effect. How do you address that?
You know, I think that that's something that comes down to kind of understanding your, getting to the depths of and the roots of yourself. One thing that you might want to consider, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a therapist or I work for Blomquist Health, but a therapist is a good place to go and start uncovering some of those things within yourself. I hear you completely, and I think that particularly within this state, that's one of the biggest problems is that people who are single, who may want to be married, but for one reason or another, they're not there yet. There's a lot of shame or guilt or so many other labels that are put on them. And, you know, we need to learn to stop. I think there was a term in there called self or individual shaming or single shaming or something like that, that one of the women used. I think that that's often used, especially in our society here. So I really feel for you and I understand that. I get that. Being single as an older individual versus a single individual who's younger, it is a little bit different. And so, one thing you might want to do is start some self discovery and understanding yourself and how you find the value within yourself without having to go to that married state to find your happiness. Because remember, the people who thought they were going to be super happy once they got married, it was only 1/10 of 1 point. That's not very much.
Okay, awesome. So that is actually all the questions we have. So I just want to thank everybody for being here and remind you that I will be sending this recording out later today or tomorrow morning. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if you have questions or want to schedule an appointment, just shoot me an email and I can help you out with that and make a personal recommendation as well. So whatever you feel comfortable with. So thank you for
Thanks
joining us.
everybody for joining us. I hope it was of some value.
Yeah, it was awesome. So talk to you guys soon. Thanks.